this is Kathleen. I hope you like to use ribbon and fibers in your junk journals because that's what I want to talk to you about today. Tips and techniques for using particularly ribbon in your junk journals. Some of you have commented that you like the way I weave the ribbon through the holes in the sides of my signature papers. I'm glad you like it. I think it's an effective and easy way to add some color and texture to the journal. And I say easy because I think it's easy, but apparently that's relative. And some of you have had a hard time achieving the same look. And without really knowing exactly what the problem is, I wanted to respond and do a demonstration as you asked for, to show you how I do this. And I want to talk a little bit about the papers that have holes and a little bit about how the size of the holes will determine the kind of ribbon or fiber that you want to use. And then we'll talk a little bit about the fiber and the ribbons and the size and where to find them and that kind of thing. And then I'll demonstrate how I do it. And then I want to give you just a few other ideas about how to use ribbon in a junk journal. And some of you do this already, and some of you may not have seen some of this. So here we go. Let's talk for a minute about the papers. These are the papers that I have in my stash and that I typically use. This came from a journal that had those kind of double wires that hold it together. Those are the kinds of binding that make these square holes. So I have 3 or 4 of those kinds of papers. The large ones like this I use and fold them, and they become just pages, whole pages in the signature, and the ribbon ends up at the top. Some of these smaller ones I use as ephemera in pockets, or often I will fold them as well this way, and then they become shorts, so they get layered with other things, and then the ribbon is again at the top. Sometimes it's at the side, and as I say, I might fold it like this and use that as a tag type shape, or just a journal paper in a pocket. I have a number of these, and you can just kind of keep your eye out. This is not a vintage piece, so sometimes I will coffee dye it or smush it, hand dye some other way. It has these larger holes in the side. It was just, wire bound. And so I just take the fibers and weave through there. I have other little pieces of ephemera. These are vintage. They came from a record collection kind of organizer. And you can weave things through just like this, in and out, or you can do that whip stitch, like a leather lacing, kind of across each hole at the top. So there's a couple different ways. This is just, from an address book. It's also not vintage, so it can be coffee dyed. But my favorite pieces to use are these kinds of square holes, because you can actually find the flat ribbon to weave through there, and I really like that. These are just notebooks. This was a music manuscript book. So my favorite pieces, though, are these old stenographer's notebook. This one is not particularly vintage, a little bit, but but it's not old. But I have had a pad that was beautifully vintage and quite fragile. And so I'll talk about how to do that. This has the same kind of thing, really small holes, and they're quite close together, easily ripped. This is just a regular school notebook, but it was wire bound, and it has a little bit of a different shape on the holes, but it also has that perforation that you can see. And so this has to be prepared. Let me move these aside, and I'll show you how I would prepare that page. I also may not want it to go always at the top. I might want to make it more of a narrower page in the journal, so I would cut it off and fold it, you know, maybe in a different way. So this would get bound in to the journal, and then you've got this side, and it would have to be sliced off a little. But I would take something like this really wide washi tape, glue, and I would just put that across that perforation, and I would do it on both sides. And cover up the holes at the same time. Oops. It's hard to get things on straight, to be honest, when I'm on camera. That's one of the frustrating things. And so then that kind of prepares the paper. It could be just a journaling paper again in a pocket, or it could get bound in like that. So here's how that looks. Let's finish it off on this side. So when I find that I have to trim one of these, then I try to trim it. You can just barely see. I try to trim it on the other side of the hole so that there is as much paper there as possible, right? Okay, so now, if you have the little round holes like this, you need fiber that is very thin. So I like to use pearl cotton, what's called pearl cotton. And this is vintage. And it has, it's just very thin enough to go through there. Now the tool that you're going to need, one of these darning needles. It's the same for this piece of paper. Those holes are pretty small, but it's also flat. So it's not a rounded hole. So this part of it right there, that's flat, versus this part of it, which is rounded. So honestly, how it lays, you really only have, you have maybe the same amount of room, but this curved paper is going to get torn if you use a flat ribbon rather than a rounded ribbon. But on this one, you can see that we could use a flat ribbon. Okay, so all I would do is I would just come up and down. And to be honest, this is really tedious. Yeah, it is. And there's no way around it, because you can't if you're going to use flat ribbon, you have to do it up and down. And you can't do a bunch, because then this is what happens. If you get too far down here without straightening it out, then it just is not going to look good. So you just simply have to take the time to go in and out. And then straighten each one. Okay, let me finish this and I'll be back. You have to be careful to keep it straight and not twisted. Okay, and when you get to the end, then you want to take just a tiny bit of glue and glue those ends down so that the ribbon doesn't pull out. There you go. Yeah, I like it. I think it's pretty, and I'm glad that many of you do too. Okay, now let's do these small fragile edges. So you can use a darning needle, and that's going to make it easier. You can just use the needle and that will be faster, but you can see that the problem is, unless your fiber is really flexible, you've got to take two layers of it through the hole, plus the needle. So if the eye of the needle is not too thick, then it will come through the holes okay. But you have to be really careful not to tear these little spaces right there. And if your fiber is thick, or if it's bumpy, then you risk tearing through the paper. So that's nice. That looks good, just like that. And sometimes I may want to just leave it like that. But sometimes I want to come back through. Do you see how I've come down and up, down and up? Now I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to turn it around and come opposite of the way I came before. And be careful that you don't split the fiber. That won't look good. And you can see that that makes kind of this kind of a pattern, and I really like that. So some of you who have my journals, you might have this, because I really like to do it. It's my favorite way. It covers up more of the holes, edges, and then it just makes that pretty little stair step. You can see that with these holes, and if I want to use a little bit of a thicker bit of fiber, this is kind of a flat, but it's a flexible fiber. But it would, if I tried to double that and use the needle, it would bunch up in the hole. So sometimes I make my own needle. So I just take just some white glue, Elmer's or Aleene's, and I squeeze a little out, and then I twist the end of the fiber. It allows me to make a needle, and the fiber comes through in a single strand instead of a double strand. But again, this is still, it's tedious. There's no way around that. You know, if you could use a needle, it would go a lot faster because the needle is longer. But that allows me to use a little bit thicker of a fiber in these small holes without tearing through the holes. Okay, so there's another tip. So if I want to use, you know, a thicker, I can do that, but the ribbon has to be flexible, because you can see if I'm going to use this in here, it's just barely too thick for the holes. So then you get this nice rounded, bunched up kind of look, and I really like that. Yeah, so I do tend to try to push the width, and using like chiffon, that sometimes works. But before I go very far, I have to pull it all the way down. Because if I go the whole length and have to pull very many of those, it will start to rip the corners of the holes, and I don't want that to happen. So I just take the time and do it kind of one at a time, and pull the ribbon down, and then it turns out good. Okay, let me show you how this looks in a journal. So this is the way I do a lot of the shorts. I layer them like this, and then I have one of these generally that has this ribbon through there. Here's the place in the back, and so the way I start it, I start near the spine. It's easier if you can weave it like this before you fold it and put it in the signature. But sometimes I don't know what color I want to use, or sometimes I don't use ribbon on these. I just leave them because I also like the look of the holes. So you don't have to use ribbon in your holes. One hole at a time. And then when I am finished, you can see that in this place, there's not enough room for me right there to make the glue. I need to glue it on this space, on this side. So I'm now just going to come in and put just a dab of glue there, so that that's held and it won't come out. So now I just need to pull my ribbons. And I'm not going to pull all the way from this end because I don't want to tear the edges. I don't want to tear the corners. I speak from experience. And you know, you make a mistake once, and then you're careful. Just try not to do it again. So there's that, and then on this side, because that's now glued right there, now I can come along and trim that, and it won't pull out. Okay, and then on this side, I can also put just a dab of glue there, and then that will hold it. Okay, so this journal is almost finished. I just only have to do the closure with the beads. But I wanted to just show you the other ways that I have used ribbon in this journal. So again, I've used it along here. Where else? Oh, I punched some holes. That's the other thing I was going to say. If you can have a tool like this, that's great. But otherwise, you can just take a normal hole punch and measure with a ruler and a pencil. Measure where the holes would go, and just use an ordinary hole punch to make some holes, which is what I've done there. Here I have made this ribbon cluster, kind of at the side of this little pocket. And so I've got a number of ribbons there. I'm going to refer you to Buttons for Brains, Liz at Buttons for Brains. She has a cute channel. I love her. She has a lot of really good ideas, and she just recently did a video about making cluster edges for your papers. I will link that video, and you can go check Liz out, because you're gonna love her channel, I'm sure, if you're not already subscribed. Okay, another way I use ribbon is I just use it often like washi tape, and I just glue a strip down on the edge of a page, or like here I've done that along the edge of this little sack, and then I've just put a couple of little brads there. Of course, you know, you can use ribbons and tie bows and tags and that kind of thing. I do love using ribbons. And then I use them as tabs. Sometimes these are top tabs, and that's all it is, just a fold over ribbon there. And here, a lot of times I'll use ribbons as the base, you know, of a side tab. And then, of course, these ribbon ruffles. This is just a sewn tuck, and that's also pretty. So there's a couple of ideas and a demonstration on how to achieve these woven ribbons. I hope that was helpful, particularly to my sweet friend from Texas. I hope that helps. If you have a specific question about something that's not working, thanks for letting me know, and I'll try to help you solve the problem. Thanks for your time. I always appreciate your likes and comments. I really do. And I will be back with another project, and probably pretty quick I'll do a flip through of this journal. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.